All right, hello. This is the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, 1-4 Transcontinental Airmail Routes. Airmail routes continued to expand until the Transcontinental Mail Route was inaugurated. This route spanned from San Francisco to New York for a total distance of 2,612 miles with 13 intermediate stops along the way. On May 20, 1926, Congress passed the Air Commerce Act, which served as a cornerstone for aviation within the United States. This legislation was supported by leaders in the aviation industry who felt that the airplane could not reach its full potential without assistance from the federal government in improving safety. The Air Commerce Act charged the Secretary of Commerce with fostering air commerce, issuing and enforcing air traffic rules, licensing pilots, certifying aircraft, certificating aircraft, establishing airways, and operating and maintaining aids to air navigation. The Department of Commerce created a new aeronautics branch whose primary mission was to provide oversight for the aviation industry. In addition, the aeronautics branch took over the construction and operation of the nation's system of lighted airways. The Postal Service, as a part of Transcontinental Air Mail Route System, had initiated this system. The Department of Commerce made great advances in aviation communications as well as introducing radio beacons as an effective means of navigation. Built at intervals of approximately 10 miles, the standard beacon tower was 51 feet high, topped with a powerful rotating light. Below the rotating light, two course lights pointed forward and back along the airway. The course lights flashed a code to identify the beacon's number. The tower usually stood in the center of a concrete arrow 70 feet long. A generator shed, where required, stood at the feather end of the arrow. Great idea. Federal certification of pilots and mechanics. The Aeronautics branch of the Department of Commerce began pilot certification with the first license issued on April 6, 1927. The recipient was the chief of the Aeronautics branch, William P. McCracken, Jr. Orville Wright, who was no longer an active flyer, had declined the honor. McCracken's license was the first issued to a pilot by a civilian agency of the federal government. Some 3 months later, the Aeronautics branch issued the first federal aircraft mechanic license. Equally important for safety was the establishment of the system of certification for aircraft. On March 29, 1927, the Aeronautics branch issued the first airworthiness type certificate to the Buell Airster CA-3, a three-place open biplane. In 1934, to recognize the tremendous strides made in aviation and to display the enhanced status within the department, the Aeronautics branch was renamed the Bureau of Air Commerce. Within this time frame, the Bureau of Air Commerce brought together a group of airlines and encouraged them to form the first 3 air traffic control ATC facilities along the established air routes. Then, in 1936, the Bureau of Air Commerce took over the responsibilities of operating the centers and continued to advance the ATC, air traffic control facilities. ATC has come a long way from early controllers using maps, chalkboards, and performing mental math calculations in order to separate aircraft along flight routes. The Civil Aeronautics Act of 1938. In 1938, the Civil Aeronautics Act transferred the civil aviation responsibilities to a newly created independent body named the Civil Aeronautics Authority. This act empowered the CAA to regulate airfares and establish new routes for airlines to service. President Franklin Roosevelt split the CAA into 2 agencies, the Civil Aeronautics Administration, CAA, and the Civil Aeronautics Board, CAB. Both agencies were still part of the Department of Commerce, but the CAB functioned independently of the Secretary of Commerce. The role of the CAA was to facilitate ATC, certification of airmen and aircraft, rule enforcement, and the development of new airways. The CAB was charged with rule-making to enhance safety, accident investigation, and the economic regulation of airlines. Then in 1946, Congress gave the CAA the responsibility of administering the Federal Aid Airport Program. This program was designed to promote the establishment of civil airports throughout the country. All right, we're going to go into the Federal Aviation Act of 19... Wow. All right, the Federal Aviation Act of 1958. By mid-century, air traffic had increased and jet aircraft had been introduced into the civil aviation arena. A series of mid-air collisions underlined the need for more regulation of the aviation industry. Aircraft were not only increasing in numbers, but were now streaking across the skies at much higher speeds. The Federal Aviation Act of 1958 established a new independent body that assumed the roles of CAA and transferred the rule-making authority of the CAB to the newly created Federal Aviation Agency, FAA. In addition, the FAA was given complete control of the common civil military system of air navigation and ATC. The man who was given the honor of being the first administrator of the FAA was former Air Force General Elwood Richard P. Quesada. He served as administrator from 1959 to 1961. Department of Transportation, DOT. On October 15, 1966, Congress established the Department of Transportation, the DOT, which was given oversight of the transportation industry within the United States. The result was a combination of both air and surface transportation. Its mission was and is to serve the United States by ensuring a fast, safe, efficient, accessible, and convenient transportation system meeting vital national interests and enhancing the quality of life of the American people, then, now, and into the future. At this time, the Federal Aviation Agency was renamed to the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA. The DOT began operation on April 1st, 1967. The role of the CAB was assumed by the newly created National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, which was charged with the investigation of all transportation accidents within the United States. As aviation continued to grow, the FAA took on additional duties and responsibilities. With the hijacking epidemic of 1960s, the FAA was responsible for increasing the security duties of aviations both on ground and in the air. After September 11, 2001, the duties were transferred to a newly created body called the Department of Homeland Security. With numerous aircraft flying in and out of larger cities, the FAA began to concentrate on the environmental aspect of aviation by establishing and regulating the noise standards of aircraft. Additionally, in the 1960s and 70s, the FAA began to regulate high altitude, over 500 feet, kite and balloon flying. 1970 brought more duties to the FAA by adding the management of the new Federal Airport Aid Program and increased responsibility for airport safety. All right, we'll go one more. Air traffic control, ATC automation. By the mid-1970s, the FAA had achieved a semi-automated ATC system based on a marriage of radar and computer technology. By automating certain routine tasks, the system allowed controllers to concentrate more efficiently on vital tasks of providing aircraft separation. Data appearing directly on the controller's scopes provided the identity, altitude, and ground speed of aircraft carrying radar beacons. Despite its effectiveness, this system required enhancement to keep pace with increased air traffic of the late 1970s. The increase was due in part to the competitive environment created by the Airline Deregulation Act of 1978. This law phased out CAB's economic regulation of the airlines, and CAB ceased to exist at the end of 1984. Civil Aeronautics Board, CAB. To meet the challenges of traffic growth, the FAA unveiled the National Airspace System (NAS) plan in January 1982. The new plan called for more advanced systems for the en-route and terminal ATC, modernized flight service stations, and improvements in ground-to-air surveillance and communication. We're going to hold off there. That was the end of 1-6 in Chapter 1. End of 1-6. All right? Take care. Bye.